And the latest from the Israel-Hamas war. 24 hostages have been released by Hamas and 39 prisoners have been released by Israel as a part of a 4-day truce. The war between Israel and Hamas, which has been raging for weeks now, finally witnesses a few moments of peace. Families on both the sides of the war are now reuniting with their lost loved ones. Have a look at these visuals. This is where it all began. This is how Hamas handed over Israeli hostages to the Red Cross. Most of the hostages were aged and the youngest was a 2-year-old child. The hostage swap was two-way. The hostages released on Friday from Gaza included 13 Israelis, 10 Thai and 1 Filipino citizen. Qatar, who is mediating the truce, also said that he is hopeful that the American hostages will also be released and at least 4 Americans who are women and children will be released soon. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reacted to the development last night and welcomed the hostages back into the country. Take a listen.
השלמנו עכשיו את החזרת ראשוני חטופינו. ילדים, האימהות שלהם, נשים נוספות, כל אחת ואחת מהן עולם ומלואו. אבל אני מדגיש לכם, למשפחות ולכם אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו מחויבים להחזרת כל חטופינו.
A crowd of overjoyed Israelis welcomed children and women who were held hostage by Hamas in Gaza for 49 days since the war broke out on October 7th. The hostages were transported by helicopters to the hospital in central Israel. The hostages, upon entry into Israel, were subjected to a thorough medical examination, and the hostages were declared to be healthy and safe.
About half an hour ago, I was thrilled to be the one to receive 4 children, 3 mothers and a grandmother to the best and most caring hands here at Schneider Children's Medical Center of Israel. Their physical condition is good and they're currently undergoing medical and emotional assessment by the medical and psychological team here at Schneider's. We designated a special area that is very private, and there is also a team from our neighbor Beilinson Hospital that is assisting us in taking care of the women.
Another 5 women who were Hamas's hostages were transported aboard a chopper to the medical center in Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Palestinians are also rejoicing the return of 39 prisoners held in Israeli jails. A massive crowd gathered and cheered as prisoners arrived in a town outside West Bank's Ramallah. The release of the 39 prisoners is a part of the latest truce deal between Israel and the Hamas militants.
الوضع جوا صعب على الاخر صعب الوضع يعني ما اقدرش اوصف الوضع جوا قد ما هو صعب كيف يعني 13 من الغرفه ما فيش اكل زي الخليج ما بجيبلكش وجبات طعام منيحه
حريتنا لم تكتمل الا لتحرير اخر اسير بسجون الاحتلال. مشاعر الفرح مغلفة بالحزن على المجزرة التي يرتكبها الكيان الإسرائيلي بحق شعبنا بقطاع غزة. بنوجه تحية الوفاء والنصر لأهلنا بقطاع غزة. فاليوم نقدر نحكي إنه إحنا حطمنا السلاسل وأغلقت زنزانة التحقيق.
Essential aid has also begun to flow into the Gaza Strip after the truce came into effect on Friday. Trucks loaded with humanitarian aid entered Gaza through the Rafah border. 137 trucks of goods have been offloaded in Gaza, making it the biggest convoy received since October 7th. Up next, Israel has also received a list of hostages set to be freed today by Hamas. And this will mark the second day of the planned 4-day truce between the warring sides. And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tarani sends this report from New York. Take a look.
Speaking from Nantucket, Massachusetts, where the president is spending Thanksgiving weekend, he said that Americans have even more to be thankful for this Thanksgiving with the news of the release of some 24 hostages from Hamas captivity. While no Americans were among those released on Friday, it had been earlier reported that 3 Americans may have been part of the initial release of hostages. Nonetheless, President Biden admitted that he does not know when Hamas would free U.S. hostages. Asked whether or not this truce or ceasefire would be extended in order to release more hostages, the president said, quote unquote, the chances are real. President Biden also stressed that this is only a start, acknowledging that it has so far gone well, this truce between Israel and Hamas. However, with this pause in fighting, there is also this air of uncertainty on whether or not the deal could fall through any day. There's also concern on the U.S. part regarding the attack on U.S. troops and service members across the Middle East. For now, no U.S. troop or service member has been killed. However, if that changes, then America's response will be detrimental. And as for now, there are no good options. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
And for more on this, we're now being joined by Glenn Carl. Mr. Carl is a former national intelligence officer from the CIA and a national security and foreign experts. Welcome to the broadcast, Mr. Carl.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Carl, now just a short while ago, U.S. President Joe Biden has said that the chances of an extension of the ongoing truce were real. What is your assessment? What are the chances of the current ceasefire extending? Because we heard Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu also asserting on how they are committed in achieving all the goals of the war and bringing back all the hostages back to Israel.
Well, it seems that a ceasefire, I'm confident a ceasefire is an advantage for both parties, not only because of the exchange of prisoners, which is a good thing for the Palestinians and Hamas, and a good thing for the Israelis and the Netanyahu government, but also because it gives, in particular, Hamas a chance to resupply, reorganize, and plan for the Israelis also. But since Hamas is the weaker party and under attack at this time, I think the ceasefire probably does help Hamas. Of course, the Israelis will be watching as this plays out, but I can see the ceasefire extending for a day or two. We've heard that the Israelis have offered to extend the ceasefire 24 hours for each 10 hostages released. And so I think the prospects are strong that will probably happen for another day or two anyway, in addition to what's already agreed.
Right, Mr. Carl, you speak of how the ceasefire could be extended beyond the 4 days. But Netanyahu has clearly lamented that the war is not over. At this moment, do you think Israel will be able to strike a balance between hostage release and eliminating Hamas, which is its ultimate aim? Well,
if as you have just framed it in those terms, I think the answer is yes. I think that the Israelis probably will continue a ceasefire or be willing to do it, to extend it for more hostages. And that doesn't change at all their plans to, or their objective of eliminating Hamas. Now, whether Israel can achieve that has always been a much larger question, and that's a challenge at best.
Mr. Carl, while the truce is in effect, we've seen the success on day one of the truce. The Israeli military has warned people against returning to northern Gaza, clearly outlining how the war is not over. And apart from that, an IDF spokesperson also said that they intend to demolish many tunnels after the ceasefire completes.
I'm sure all of that is true. And we've also heard reports, I'm sure you have, of Palestinians who tried to return to the northern half of Gaza and apparently were fired upon, and also who were subjected to tear gas to disperse them, I think, or keep them from coming north. Israel will continue to try to blow up the tunnels. I think that objective, Israel probably can have a large measure of success in achieving. But blowing up tunnels is not the same thing as destroying Hamas as a coherent organization.
Right, Mr. Kalju. Just a short while ago, U.S. President Joe Biden held a press conference and said that putting conditions on military aid is a worthwhile thought. How do you gauge that statement by Biden, and why has the statement come now after the U.S. has already given $14.3 billion in aid to Israel?
Well, Biden is caught on the horns of a dilemma. For that matter, everyone involved or touched by this fighting is on the horns of a dilemma too. Biden has, as we all know, strongly, at the very least, we could say strongly expressed or extended the support of the United States to Netanyahu's government as it tries to eliminate Hamas. But at the same time, progressively, Biden's administration has been trying to keep the Israelis from killing Palestinian civilians, probably an impossible task if they're attacking in Gaza, and is trying, Biden's administration, to pressure progressively, it appears, the Netanyahu government to realize, I think, that the costs of its current military campaign are growing probably faster than the rewards that Israel is achieving by killing more Hamas fighters. But it's an unsatisfactory balancing act for much of the Muslim world, and for that matter, for many other people. And that's the dilemma Biden is trying to
yes,
solve, how to pressure Israel while supporting Israel.
Right, Mr. Kahl, there are also growing calls around the world for a permanent ceasefire. How do you think that the international community, especially countries like the US and Qatar, which have clearly played a major role of mediation, how are they going to use their weight that they have in this, maybe to change Israeli minds for a permanent ceasefire? Like we've been talking about how Netanyahu is adamant when he says that the war is not over.
I think probably, without stating it publicly, Qatar even would agree with Netanyahu's statement there, and the U.S. probably too. Most Muslim governments are not very favorably disposed towards Hamas, and although they strongly support the Palestinian people and oppose Israel's seemingly uncontrolled or poorly controlled attacks, which are causing so much Palestinian death. It's a bit early, it seems to me, in the view of most governments, frankly. That's not the populations, but most governments, for a ceasefire because Hamas remains as I said before, a coherent entity and quite capable of continuing to control Gaza and to attack Israel. And Hamas doesn't have a lot of friends other than in Tehran and progressively, it seems, in Moscow.
Mr. Kahl, what would you say? Do you think that the IDF mission in Gaza has been a success so far?
For Israel?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I think the short answer is no. Israel had to respond after 1,300 massacred people, but it didn't necessarily have to respond for 6 weeks and killing many thousands of Palestinians. And I and many others, before Israel went into Gaza with the army, were very doubtful that a conventional military campaign could eliminate Hamas, functionally eliminate Hamas, without causing so much suffering of the Palestinians that the harm to Israel and the instability and dangers for the entire region and world would not outweigh the supposed benefit that Israel is trying to achieve.
Right, Mr. Karl, thank you so much for joining us here on WION and sharing your insights with us.
Anytime.